organizing as part of our new partnership with the National Whistleblower Center, using whistleblower laws to promote environmental enforcement. My name is Carl Brook, and I direct international programs at the Environmental Law Institute. I'm also a senior advisor to the International Network for Environmental Compliance and Enforcement, or INES. To give a little bit of background on INES, we are a global network that focuses on improving environmental compliance and enforcement through capacity building, knowledge exchange, and partnerships. We provide a platform that brings together practitioners from all sides of the compliance and enforcement chain to share ideas, improve strategies, and build on prior experiences. We're a membership-based organization, and ELI serves as the secretariat. For those who are interested in learning more about INES, you can go to ines.org or pick up one of the flyers at the back of the room. Joining us today for a talk on whistleblower provisions in U.S. laws is Stephen Cohen, Executive Director and co-founder of the National Whistleblower Center and a leading whistleblower legal expert. Steve has worked with and represented whistleblowers in a variety of sectors for over 30 years. He obtained the largest ever reward given to an individual whistleblower, $104 million for exposing illegal offshore bank accounts. He published extensively on whistleblower law, including the new Whistleblower's Handbook, which is both at your desk and at the back of the room. We're thrilled that he's here with us today to expand on the transnational and environmental applications of U.S. whistleblower laws. I should say that this introduction understates just how much of a driver Steve is in this field. So we are truly privileged to have him here. This webinar is the first in a discussion series that INES and the National Whistleblower Center are co-hosting. The larger discussion series will examine the role of whistleblowing and other civic engagement in environmental monitoring and enforcement, and explore how this is changing the regulatory and practical landscape of environmental compliance and enforcement globally. The session will be, we'll start with an introduction to whistleblower laws in the US, and we will then conclude with a discussion period. There will be subsequent webinars dealing with other specific topics. If you're joining us via webinar, please remember that you may ask your questions by typing them into the question box. We'll get to them during the Q&A period. Without further ado, Steve Cohen.
Thank you so much, Carl, and for that great introduction. And thank everyone for coming and participating online. I really want to thank ELI for sponsoring this and being very supportive of our whistleblower programming. INES for the great work they're doing and also supporting us, and specifically Ivy, Shara, and Carl for all your help. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
The Endangered Species Act is a great law. CITES is a great convention. Maripol was a great convention. IUU fishing rules that are coming out, excellent. The old Lacey Act, the first U.S. environmental law, great. But without enforcement, I hate to say it, are they worth the paper they're printed on? And without enforcement, they're probably printed on paper that was illegally harvested from some rainforest in Peru. So that's what we're talking about here. The laws are great, the motives are great, but without enforcement, what do you have? I also want to say, I'm doing a case right now, and enforcement's an interesting thing, because you can't think about some poacher hanging out in the forest, or think about, some illegal fisher person, going in and breaking up a coral reef. To understand enforcement, you have to understand it from the top to the bottom. And I'm doing a case right now, it's a very interesting case. It's against the Danske Bank in Denmark, the largest bank in Denmark. And Denmark is a country noted for honesty, rates very high in all the anti-corruption indexes, And you would think that Denmark is a great place for compliance. They have a great reputation. Yet, through a whistleblower, and the case is ongoing, the largest money laundering scheme in world history was hatched through that bank. The bank was targeted because it had a reputation for being honest. Every single internal control failed. And in money laundering, there are many, many rules and regulations. IUU fishing today, they're implementing rules and regulations to prevent illegal fishing. But believe me, in the banking industry for money laundering, those rules have been around a long time and they're much more strict. Yet every single one failed. In Denmark, so the shocking amount, which even shocked us when the internal review was done, $240 billion of suspicious and money laundered activity from Russia. Rubles converted to dollars and shipped to New York through 3 correspondent banks, Bank of America, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, New York, all of which should have had controls, and then the money dispersed to wherever it went. Who knows? Who knows where those billions of Russian dirty money went? We've tracked down a little. Some paid bribes in Italy. There was a gigantic scandal of billions of dollars in Azerbaijan for bribery of their government officials. It's all under investigation now. But when you're thinking about compliance, you have to think holistically. Because unfortunately, greed drives much human behavior. And good people do bad things, especially when money's on the table. I just want to put that out there because that's how we look at compliance, not just the little guy at the bottom. You got to go straight through. And you'll see as I get into this, one of the biggest links, one of the biggest ways to enforce these laws is through the importers and shippers, large corporations that move the illegal product, just like the banks move the money laundered cash. We'll get into that. So let's start about what whistleblowing is all about. So Senator Charles Grassley has been a big supporter of whistleblowing for many years, but what makes him unique is he's been active in the area since 1985. And as any legislator, he's probably the #1 expert since he's drafted the laws and monitored them since '85. And this quote that he has, I think, sums it up. Going after fraud or abuse without whistleblowers is about as useful as harvesting acres of corn with a pair of rusty old scissors. And Senator Grassley is a farmer. Whistleblowing does have bipartisan support. It's one of our most important goals. Corruption is not a Democrat or Republican issue. Bribery, if you think only, one party or the other takes bribes or engages in improper activity, you're in a dream. Good people do bad things. This is the way it is. And this is from the Trump administration, one of their assistant attorney generals. Because those who commit fraud often hide their misconduct from public view, whistleblowers are often essential to uncovering the truth. Understatement, but accurate. Environmental crimes, white-collar crimes, corruption, fraud. The people who commit these crimes don't want to be detected. It's kind of very easy. So how do you detect? How do you enforce? And it's what he says here, whistleblowers are often essential. I'll say they're more than essential. This was from a study done by the Chicago School of Economics, published by them. And as people may know, the Chicago School of Economics is not noted as a liberal bastion. It's a very conservative or free market based economic analysis. And They studied every major fraud case over a certain period of time. They concluded that whistleblowing was essential for enforcement. And this is their quote. This is their finding. Honest behavior is not rewarded. Given the costs of whistleblowing, the surprising part is not that most employees don't talk, but that some talk at all. Mark my word, there are employees, fishermen, lumbermen, people in communities that know every single environmental crime being committed today on Earth. Every one. Every one. And the trick is to get some of them to step forward and report it. But as we sit here, there are witnesses and potential whistleblowers to every single environmental crime. And what he's talking about here in their study was, my God, the issue isn't whether someone will become a whistleblower. It's like, why would they ever do it? There's no upside. Maybe you lose your job, maybe you lose your life. Why would you do it? So they asked that question, which also includes another question. How would you do it? So these are the two questions. If we're sitting today on a resource, an invaluable resource, which are the employees and community people who know of every single environmental crime in the world, the question is, how do you exploit that resource? How do you turn that resource into your weapon? And we now know how, from years of experimentation and work, in large part from this study that looked at it objectively. Modern whistleblowing traces itself to the Civil War, to the radical Republicans who were running our government in 1863, and who were concerned that the North was going to lose and slavery would prevail. And the Civil War had, for the first time in our history, what could be considered large-scale government contracting. And there was massive fraud. And they were trying to figure out how to stop the fraud. Now, I'm going to get back. This very law here is now perhaps today the best law we can use to fight environmental crimes. I'm going to get that as we move down the line. But as it was developed initially, it was thought of to protect the Union Army from fraud, from sawdust being sold as gunpowder. They were selling blind horses. Soldiers were dying from contaminated food. You know, defense contracting 101. So they passed the False Claims Act in a very simple structure. It takes a thief to catch a thief was their motto. Provide a financial incentive to those inside the criminal conspiracy to step forward and use them as the witnesses to stop the conspiracy. And then they utilized an old tactic from the mid-ages, before there were police departments, known as qui tam, in the name of the king. They would empower the people to have the powers of the king. And that was the heart of modern whistleblowing. It's ultimately probably the most important citizen empowerment law available. It gives it gives the whistleblower the same authorities as the government to fight crime and corruption. If you think about it, it gives, if there is someone in Peru, in a rainforest, who can't speak English and makes about $100 a month on a good month, that person under this law can be empowered with the authorities of the United States Attorney General and to file a lawsuit in federal court confidentially to hold accountable that company that's cutting down that rainforest, the importers that are bringing it into the United States, and anyone in the United States using that lumber. And not only is that farmer or lumberman empowered with those rights, regardless of what country they're from, if their information is used for successful enforcement action, and it happens all the time, by the way, this is now #1 source of all these enforcements, they're entitled mandatory to 15 to 30% of what the government collects. And this is not hyperbole. Last year, the United States government under the Trump administration paid about $400 million to these whistleblowers. And that's consistent with what Obama administration was paying. It's now recognized as the #1 source of fraud detection. So you're talking about a tool that has immense potential, but has been radically underutilized in the environmental and trafficking space. Footnote: thanks immensely to the Wildlife Crime Tech Challenge for recognizing this in USAID and trying to move whistleblowing into environmental enforcement. It was very good. Not to go into details, we can answer the questions, but the law is very good and it mandates the 15 to 30% reward. Obviously, there are some disqualifications. There's ways to get better, ways to get worse, but this is the core of it. So now let's see what they're saying. And this quote, to me, sums it all up. I could end the discussion now. The False Claims Act whistleblower law is, quote, the most powerful tool the American people have to protect the government from fraud. The most, not an important tool, not useful, not happy on a good day. Most. So doesn't it only make sense to turn the most powerful weapon into the cause of environmental enforcement, wildlife trafficking, IUU fishing, illegal lumbering, ocean pollution, all of which is wide open. This is Assistant Attorney General under the Trump administration, 2018. The taxpayers owe a debt of gratitude to those who often put so much on the line to expose these fraudulent schemes. That's true. Let's talk about it in dollars and cents. The US government officials would not be out there saying it's the most effective tool if there wasn't some evidence behind it. Mark my word, having represented whistleblowers for over 30 years, government officials aren't going to be around singing the praise of whistleblowers unless there's some very strong evidence to back that up. That's reality. So here it is. Because the False Claims Act requires whistleblowers to be compensated, the government must collect statistics on every case that comes in. And they have to categorize the case. Did it come in from a whistleblower? We got to pay them. Did it not come in? Did the government catch it with all their immense inspector generals, auditors, customs agents, all that army of enforcement? Did the government find it? Well, let's look at 2017 where the numbers came in. 3.4 billion was recovered, 92% from whistleblower disclosures. And in that year, whistleblowers received 392 million in rewards. So that's the ball game. The numbers show that it's the whistleblower, but it's kind of common sense if you think about it. How are you going to learn about illegal lumbering? How are you going to learn about illegal fishing? How are you going to learn about trafficking in ivory? Where are you going to find that out? Well, we know. It's from whistleblowers, especially if they're incentivized and protected in a methodology pioneered by Abe Lincoln and the radical Republicans and now fully implemented by the United States. Just so you know, the modern False Claims Act came into being, was amended in 1986, and that blue line shows how enforcement increased over time. It's kind of obvious when the law was first amended and modernized, very few people used it. No one knew what it was about. As more and more people used it, more recoveries, more enforcement. That blue line just tracks it, the trajectory. That's what we need to see in environmental enforcement. That's what we need to see in trafficking. Today, we're at a very low level. It's hard to get enforcement. But once I believe these laws are fully implemented, modernized, I think we'll see that also. No need to go through all these numbers. I just want to say that a place right now where the False Claims Act is being used is in customs. If somebody imports goods into the United States, but lies about their value, their origin, what the product is, they can be found guilty under the False Claims Act. It's a Customs Act violation. What CITES protected species is legally imported into the United States? What importer properly declares their illegal lumber? Fishing company properly declares, oh, all my tuna was caught in violation of IUU rules. I want to bring it into America. The violation of IUU fishing, of CITES protections, of endangered species at the border, at the level of importation, that's where it's coming in, is almost a per se violation of the False Claims Act. Treble damages, $20,000 per invoice, and whistleblower full protection and rewards, 15 to 30%. The customs is, they're getting into it. I've been told, and this is not confirmed, but I've been told by prosecutors that they're really into these customs cases now, the government, Department of Justice, because they're easy to win. If you have proof that say the IUU fishing rules were violated and stuff hits America, case over. The False Claims Act looks at pieces of paper. As long as you have the underlying rules, they're going to rely on that piece of paper they use to bring product into the United States. This is a 2000, either 17 or 18 case. It's linked here. And I found this so interesting because it's really the future, and it's what we need to be staring at and understanding. This is from U.S. Department of Justice press release after they prosecuted this company. I'll just read it. It's very significant. Companies purchasing imported goods cannot turn a blind eye to fraud committed by their business partners. Imported goods is any type of product coming in, lumber, fish, smuggled goods, cannot turn a blind eye. Because the False Claims Act prohibits willful ignorance. Now a declaration of where the Justice Department is moving in this area. We will be vigilant in holding accountable all parties who engage in or contribute to the fraudulent conduct. In this particular case, they indicted the Chinese manufacturer, but they couldn't get the Chinese manufacturer. But they did get the folks in New York City who brought it in. And we're going to sell it in New York. The roadmap. Continuing from the same case, and you can see that there's a realization going on here. As global supply chains grow more complex, it is important for American businesses to know that their suppliers to know their suppliers and be confident of their integrity. As I said before, in money laundering, there's a basic rule: know your customer. Banks are required to know their customer. They're required to issue suspicious activities report. But they know if you don't know your customer, if you don't know what your customer is about, you're open to money laundering, illegal banking. Well, that's creeping right in here, but the False Claims Act just swings the door open because of its standards. Its standards are very, very good. Know their suppliers and be confident of their integrity. Now, just sit back and read your IUU phishing regs. And what these, and no one, and you know, I read stuff. You know, what can I say? I'm not an expert, but they're telling me like 10, 20% of wild-caught fish coming into America illegally harvest. I say, what? How can that be? But I also think the amount of money at issue there is massive. The amount of accountability and the potential for accountability is massive. When I put on my enforcement hat, I'm looking at some very interesting things. Not just me, by the way. Here's Jones Day. Jones Day, maybe they give to you. It's a big law firm, but they represent companies that are sued under the False Claims Act. That's one of their business niches. You're a company, you get sued, Jones Day will help you out. Well, they're catching wind too. I loved this. This is a release they issued to all importers. And actually, in their release, it said, importers beware. I should have put that in quotes. Importers are facing potential additional liability for actions they take in connection with importing items into the United States. Department of Justice has been bringing cases under the False Claims Act. They continued. This is in quotes. The False Claims Act is a particularly powerful enforcement tool. I'm telling you right now, whatever enforcement tools you're used to, the False Claims Act is better. It allows for treble damages and penalties. And because the False Claims Act claims can be initiated by private qui tam plaintiffs, i.e. whistleblowers, that's the heart of it. They know that every single employee is a potential whistleblower. Every single employee can qualify for 15 to 30% of the sanction. And as they already explained, the sanctions can be very high. Beware. That's the mantra. Okay. International application. I already mentioned it before, I'll say it again. None of these laws have a citizenship test. There is no wall. There is no green card. In fact, a foreign whistleblower might do pretty well as long as they never enter the United States, because they'll be taxed under their home country's tax laws. That's what the IRS tells me. They come into America to give the evidence, they'll be taxed under US law. Who knows? Who cares? Bottom line, any person worldwide qualifies. And in many issues, the laws are designed for non-US persons. Let's just talk banking, because he mentioned, Carl did, we had a very successful banking case where a whistleblower, one guy gets 104 million bucks. Then some people can scratch their head and say, well, how does some guy get this? There's never even a court case. He gets, here's your check. Thanks, buddy. The reason is you get between 15 and 30%, or in his law, 10 to 30%. It's mandatory. That just tells you what a big fraud he turned in. He turned in the largest bank in the world at the time, UBS in Switzerland, for all their illegal accounts, and he got his just compensation. It was a big fraud, costing the US lots of money. Here's the Irs Commissioner. The IRS's serious efforts to combat offshore evasion were brought to attention by whistleblowers. Between 12 and 18, whistleblowers got $778 million in awards under the IRS program. But here's the kicker. And it's kind of like a dream, a vision. Every known U.S. account that was illegal, undeclared U.S. account in the nation of Switzerland was shut down. Every one. So when I grew up, I'd been, I'll get a Swiss bank account and hide my money. Every one shut down. U.S. government's collected well over 16 billion in sanctions, and every day getting more. And think about how much capital, nobody knows, maybe $1 trillion, $500 billion of capital moved from illegal accounts in Switzerland back into lawful U.S. banks. And here's the other part. These are the banks, and with the press releases, that paid money and copped a plea with the Justice Department from Switzerland. Pretty much every single Swiss bank. This is from the DOJ press release. Every bank had to plead guilty or do what's known as a non-prosecution agreement. You know why? These banks realized that their bankers would make a lot more money turning in their U.S. clients than the bank would ever make serving them. The next one's, just so you know, this IRS law now covers, through a 2018 amendment, money laundering, which is hiding beneficial ownership of money moving through the international banking system. For trafficking specifically, where a lot of criminals are involved, where people are hiding their identities. This is a very big deal because you have to think about these environmental laws from a holistic capacity, from the way they do their banking all the way through if they're paying a poacher. The next one is Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the single biggest advancement in international whistleblowing, I say in world history forever. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act makes paying a bribe to a foreign government official a crime under U.S. law. You have to be a U.S. person, but it's extremely broadly defined, including pretty much every company that trades in the United States, publicly trades, and any company that lets Americans buy their stocks through something known as an ADR, American Depository Receipt. For those of you who invest may know what that is. It's just a mechanism that if you're traded, say, in Hong Kong or in London, you can still be covered under our laws. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act covers foreign bribery. And I'd like to say, I don't know many people engage in trafficking, cut down rainforests, and illegally fish because they like it. You know, the concept of Dr. Evil wanting to destroy the world is a fun movie, but I think most of the people are greed-driven, and most of the government officials that let it happen probably are taking bribes. Boom, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act now has a whistleblower reward provision. 10 to 30% rewards. And the right to be fully anonymous. And I will tell you right now, my largest case ever, the company doesn't even know there was a whistleblower. Anonymity 100% protected. The government's doing its job. It's required by statute, but I've now been working within that system since 2011, and they've been exceptional in protecting the identity of the many whistleblowers we've brought to them. So since 2011, 3,300 whistleblowers from 119 countries have filed claims under FCPA. This is a worldwide situation. Those countries in red is where the cases have been coming from during this time period. Obviously, United States, but where I didn't put that in red, but that's where you can see. So what this is telling you is two things. One is bribery. If you have any evidence of bribery tied to any type of environmental crime, you may have a great whistleblower case. But it's also telling you that there is nothing unique about Americans and whistleblowing. People in Brazil will blow the whistle. People in the UK will blow the whistle. We've got clients all over the world right now, in Africa, in Europe. That's the way it is. There's nothing unique. given an opportunity, given information about how they can do it, they'll do it. So just to reinforce the point, Deputy Commissioner of the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission administers the Foreign Corrupt Practices Program, and they just say it straight. It makes no difference whether the claimant was a foreign national, whether the claimant resides overseas, whether the information was submitted from overseas, or the misconduct occurred overseas. So when I say that these whistleblower laws have transnational application, well, take it from the SEC. They're the bigger boss. It doesn't matter. All that matters is we can catch them under a violation of one of these laws. The whistleblower can be from Uganda, Tanzania, Thailand, China, and fully anonymous and fully protected. Here's the current head of the whistleblower office. Whistleblowers, whether they are located in the US or abroad, provide a valuable service to investors to help us stop wrongdoing. This reward recognizes the continued important assistance provided by the whistleblower. These are some of the sanctions obtained under Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You can see 795 million, 20 million, 30 million, 22 million, 1.7 billion. The one good thing about some of the laws for which whistleblowing is attached to is that the fines and penalties are very high. So it's always good to try to think it through. Can I marry an environmental crime with a bribery scheme? Can I marry it with money laundering? Especially, can I marry it with a customs violation? Because now you're talking about massively increasing the penalties. But you can see these are large penalties. I can explain how they get to them at a later date. Some of this. Now let's go to the Act to Prevent Pollution on Ships. So now we're moving into a law that is directly targeted to environmental protection, the implementation of the Maripol Convention. What is interesting about this law is it kind of dovetails also with the False Claims Act. So almost what I'm saying on this law would equally apply to false claims. So although, say, the IUU fishing today doesn't have an explicit whistleblower law, married with false claims, you'll have some impact. This is a direct law, Act to Prevent Pollution on Ships, which is the domestic implementation of the Maripol Convention, i.e. pollution on the high seas. Now remember, under Maripol, it is the flag ship, the nation of the flag, that has primary enforcement authority under Maripol. And guess what? Most of the ships out there in the high seas are not US. They're flagged in Greece or Liberia or Panama. All of the pollution occurs on the high seas. By definition, not in US waters. So you have ships that aren't US, an international convention that says it's the flagship nation. You got the crimes occurring outside of US jurisdiction. And you have the seamen, the people working the boats are primarily non-US people. Looking at the cases, about 90% are from the Philippines, but they're from many different countries, but not the United States. So I ask you, how is the United States the #1 enforcer of Maripol in the world? So if anyone wants to answer that question, the answer should be obvious based on subject matter. But how does the United States #1? Does anyone want to venture an answer? He's saying rewards. That's it. Yeah, whistleblowers. And there's a reward provision in the APPS, 50% reward to the seaman. And what we did was, it's online, it's all here. we went through all of the cases, the prosecutions under APPS. And we found in almost every case there was a whistleblower, and that the Justice Department was making motions to get the whistleblower their award. Most of these whistleblowers, they can't speak English. They say they're from the Philippines or other foreign countries, Vietnam, Thailand. They don't understand our laws. So the Department of Justice has been going into court, case after case, moving for 50% reward, and the court's pretty much granting them in every case. So then we just read what the US government was saying in these cases. Here it is. The availability of the award aptly reflects the realities of life at sea. Now you can just say that, you know, what are the realities in a rainforest? What are the realities in a fishing situation where people are doing illegal fishing? What's the reality? Your law has to conform to that reality. A monetary award both rewards the crew member for taking that risk. That's the first question you have to ask. If you have witnesses to every single environmental crime in the world, what do you have to do to get that witness to take the risk of stepping forward? And may provide an incentive for other crew members. You got it right. When one crew member sees their buddy becoming a millionaire for becoming a whistleblower, and they live in the Philippines making $100 a month, they have an incentive to alert investigators. This is Department of Justice. These are just other quotes from the Department of Justice from the cases. There's 1,000 of these, by the way. Absent crew members with firsthand knowledge, illegal conduct, violations difficult to uncover. Virtually impossible to obtain the information without the crew member. Very few countries have any track record of prosecuting marital violations, let alone a legal process to protect the witnesses. This is the reality. If you are a whistleblower, potential whistleblower, Thailand or Vietnam, a fisherman, are you going to trust your local government to protect you? How are you going to feed your family? But these US laws offer these potential witnesses anonymity, confidentiality, the possibility of a large monetary reward, and the ability to bring their information into a legal structure that can actually provide for real enforcement. In short, that fisherman would be, why would they ever blow the whistle? Ever. But given the opportunities that are actually available under law, that question changes. And just like in Switzerland, it will reach a critical mass where the criminals will go somewhere else to realize that their current structures are not working. Okay, this is what my favorite part of APPS. And it is the future. Because in many ways, it's just, I mean, you know, you got to go back to Abe Lincoln. It was visionary. It was like, how in this very corrupt world, with minimum enforcement tools, how can we achieve enforcement? And they use qui tam. System works. But this is taking it to the next level. This is unbelievable. And it was done by the US Department of Justice on their own initiative through every political administration going back 25 years, regardless whether it was Bush, Clinton, Obama, Bush. Okay. We just pulled the cases from the court records, APPS. We found a case in which they recovered 177 million from polluters. They gave 32 million to the whistleblowers, almost every single one a foreigner. And you can see they gave, the largest reward was 2.1 million. The average reward is 163,000, which is a lot of money to these seamen, etc. But the number at the very bottom, the 55.6 million, is the most interesting number. That's called restitution community service. 25%, 25%. Under federal law, the Justice Department can go to these shipping companies, and these are all shipping companies, by the way, that are charged. They can go to the shipping companies and say, okay, you're guilty of a crime. But instead of going, you can't put the company in jail, blah, 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 there's something known as community service. So, community service, they get, what's his name, whoever it is, to cut grass or pick up trash along the highway, whatever. Maybe some of you had community service while you were in high school for drinking underage, I don't know, but they make you do community service. But a company can do community service by paying money, up to 25%. So the DOJ pretty much hits them up for 25% in every case. But the community service doesn't go back to U.S. Treasury. The U.S. Treasury did pretty good. We all, the taxpayers, made $139 million. It goes to non-governmental, beneficial purposes. We had a slide there. It essentially goes to environmental uses. You go to the cases and they're buying wetlands in Florida. They're giving money to the Smithsonian Institute. They're using the monies to target the victims of the crime and fix it. How did that ocean pollution harm the public? And they give it essentially to NGOs and foundations. There is, under current criminal laws, you can direct the sanctions obtained in these whistleblower cases to beneficial purposes. But it's hardly done. They do it here, hardly done. Which brings me to the Wildlife Conservation Anti-Trafficking Act, which is a bill that we are aggressively supporting, and I hope as you study it, you'll join on. This bill essentially takes the best practices from all of these whistleblower laws I've been talking about and directly puts it into trafficking and IUU fishing. It's all listed. All of the major laws, endangered species, but 100% IUU. And let's talk about what it does. It's just the best practices. First off, you have confidential and anonymous reporting. By law, essential, especially for non-US people. Then you have a whistleblower office and you pay the awards, just like under the other laws. Then you have strong civil, criminal, and administrative sanctions. Without a major sanction, enforcement means nothing. So they make trafficking and IUU fishing violations a RICO predicate offense. RICO is the major law used for racketeering, and it was used to bust the mafia. It has treble damages, large fines, good provisions for conspiracy. So just as you could use RICO to go after the mob, you can use RICO to effectively go after traffickers and those doing IUU fishing transnationally. And then, which is my favorite part, it makes this restitution option mandatory. Every single penny obtained from these environmental IUU trafficking offenses must be reinvested for beneficial purposes into the non-governmental communities to fight these or protect the environment or for conservation. So if they bust a trafficker and get a $10 million fine, that money does not go back to the Treasury. It can go directly, say, $10 million to buy some acres in Tanzania for a giraffe farm, whatever. It'll be used properly. But in my view, given if you look at the other laws and how many sanctions and fines have been produced, this law has the potential to be the #1 funding source for most conservation efforts, along with the #1 enforcement tool. It's the perfect tool. So therefore, God, get it through. And just so you know, National Whistleblower Center, wrapping it up now, did a Freedom of Information Act request to the Fish and Wildlife Service. We just wanted to know, hey, what you guys been doing with whistleblowers? Are they helpful in these trafficking cases? We had to sue, like most people do under FOIA, and they released a lot of documents, blacking out names. That was fine. And guess what? In these documents, which all should have been made public and blasted in the national news media, it's all the same. These are their quotes from some elephant case. The whistleblower provided the crucial information resulting in saving the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service thousands of dollars in investigative hours. They never would have found it without him. Another quote, in order to complete the mission and purpose of the Fish and Wildlife Service, it is extremely important and critical to provide a monetary award to the individuals who come forward and provide information to investigators. Rewards expand the informant reporting network. The next case, without the whistleblower's candor in coming forward with this information, willingness to aid the agents, contacting former employees, providing testimony, the case would never have been reached. This is right in the heart of wildlife trafficking, but it's the same. So, in summary, today, there are specific laws that can be adapted for environmental and trafficking uses. Foreign Corrupt Practices, bribery. Foreign Corrupt Act, False Claims Act, illegal imports. IRS, money laundering, tax evasion. Also, there are some very weak whistleblower provisions in the Lacey Act and Endangered Species, which we're trying to augment, and also APPS. So there are current legal mechanisms that can be used today, and anyone who thinks they want additional educational efforts on this or may have a whistleblower or want to educate people out there in the world can contact us. We'll help. But the this law will, in my view, completely revolutionize enforcement and give to not only the American people, but citizens throughout the world, the most effective enforcement tools conceivable, known to us, to fight these crimes. Thank you very much.
And now you see why Steve is such a powerful champion of whistleblower laws and provisions. For those who are online joining us by webinar, please remember you can ask questions by typing them into the question box. And I've got a few questions, but I'd like to at least give chance first for people in the room if there are any questions or comments. Okay, then I will use the prerogative until people find their courage to ask. I'm curious if you can comment a little about the evolution of the whistleblower provisions, particularly over the last 30 years. What's the most compelling for you?
Okay, sure.
About using whistleblower laws as an enforcement tool? Sure.
So if you go back, say 40 or 50 years, whistleblowing, you can remember like Deep Throat and Watergate, Daniel Ellsberg, Pentagon Papers, Ernie Fitzgerald, who just died recently for Pentagon fraud. And there were these sensational cases, massive national or international headlines, where someone from the inside had information, made it public or gave it to somebody, a journalist or whomever, and it created tremendous change. It had incredible impact. This was anecdotal. It was very unorganized. There were no real laws that harnessed it. Then you went to the phase two, which were anti-retaliation. People said, well, if people blow the whistle lawfully and use the correct procedures, they shouldn't be fired.
The so-called SLAPP protections.
Yeah, SLAPP protections. They're very defensive in nature, meaning you shouldn't be harmed if you blow the whistle. But that's not a motivator. So then in 1985, the movement happened where people looked at this old False Claims Act that Lincoln had done. There's amazing history to it, and they decided to revise it. And that was revised in 1986, which is called the Great Experiment, this paying awards. So shifting from protecting whistleblowers from retaliation to rewarding them. and also marrying the whistleblower with the government, making a tremendous incentive for the whistleblower to help the government enforce critical laws. And as you could see from that one blue line, it just worked. I think no one could believe how well it worked. I think it was a shock. Because year after year, more money, more collections, more accountability, and the billions collected, over 54 billion to date, that's such a radical understatement, because it doesn't get the changes in behaviors, which have been tremendous. It doesn't get the companies that have been put out of business. And many we've done cases where we don't get any money, but the fraudsters go to jail. We just had a case last year. The fraudster went to jail for 20 years. Companies go bankrupt because they should be. They're criminals. So those monies don't collect that. But it's like, holy Toledo, this is working. And because of that, they started putting these on other laws. The first was taxes. Whoa, we just killed Swiss banking. Then came commodities and securities, which was the big downfall on Wall Street in 2010. I didn't go through those slides, but the agents and the government officials who monitor those are just like, my God, these are the best. Foreign corrupt practices. And now, trafficking and IUU fishing is the next one up to bat. So they fixed it for these other areas. But guess what? As we're telling people, extinctions are forever. The coral reefs, when they're destroyed, they're done. We need it in this area, and there is bipartisan support. So that's been the evolution. The evolution can be summarized by two words. It works.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Okay, so this is a question from Patricia Ritchie. And sorry, Patricia, I wasn't able to unmute you correctly. So she asks, while this process seems to work better than other whistleblower approaches, don't you have one criminal turning other criminals in? How do these laws support the whistleblower who just seeks the sanity of working in a place that upholds environmental and public health?
Well, if there's no criminal activity, everyone's happy. If there is criminal activity and violations, what these laws do is creates a mechanism to safely report the violation to appropriate authorities. So if that's all you want to do, great. It has an added feature that you can become eligible for financial compensation. I've worked with whistleblowers, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. Some are very pragmatic and will only come forward because of the prospect of getting compensation, not because they're greedy, but they fear that they will lose their careers and need protection. There are others who come forward and they really don't care about financial compensation, and they just want to do the right thing. If you go statistically, and that's what I'm more interested in, there's great people, there's things happen. It's about 1,000 to 1. 1,000 whistleblowers enter, okay, maybe 500 whistleblowers will enter a reward program to every one that does not, that enters, goes in just for doing the right thing. So the laws cover everybody. But from a practical perspective, in my view, it is unrealistic to expect someone to give up so much on a hope that maybe there will be change.
I wonder if you could, just as a follow-on, there seemed to be another aspect implicit in the question of whether you are rewarding criminals.
Oh, yes, I love this one. Are you rewarding criminals? This is my favorite, because in 1863, when the Republican Senate was looking at this, they had that famous quote, which is pretty much, it takes a thief to catch a thief. This is what they understood. Those with the best information will be part of the criminal enterprise. These laws are not ethical, like they're not like award the most morally righteous person. These are laws designed to combat specific crimes. That's their goal. They use whistleblowers to get the information necessary for success. But the goal is to stop certain crimes. And what they realize, your best source often is in the middle of it. So the laws have made a division. If you are the planner and initiator, the kingpin, the person who sets up the scheme, you are pretty much disqualified. But if you're hired, say, to drive a truck to move some ivory from one city to another, or if you're the fisherman who's out there fishing and destroying a coral reef, but you're doing it because your boss told you, drop the line, you're what's known as a participant. And participants are 100% covered and are deemed to be the backbone. So going back to the Swiss banking situation, the bankers are the reason why Swiss banking collapsed for US citizens. Those are the same bankers who opened US accounts, who serviced US clients, but they did it at the request of their bosses through legal structures that made illegal banking legal in Switzerland. And it was when the people who ran the banks realized that their own bankers could turn them in, the system collapsed. So that's the differentiation: participant versus kingpin, planner, and initiator.
So we actually have a few more questions from the audience. So the next one is from Mary Jane Wilmoth asking, where might she be able to find more information about the Wildlife Conservation and Anti-Trafficking Act online?
Sure. So if you go to the Whistleblower Center's webpage, which is whistleblowerswithans.org, it's all there. You can go right to the wildlife section, and all the information on the laws there, copy of the law, supporting materials is all there. You can also listen once again to this seminar and you'll get more information. But whistleblowers.org, it's with an S, that's your best place to go.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Irs Commissioner. I'm a senior legal advisor at Global Witness. Thank you so much for the very informative presentation. And just to say, I especially appreciated the part in the beginning where you emphasized the bipartisan support that this has. And so my question to you is whether you have any concerns about what we see from the current administration and the president, who is very critical of leaks and snitches, and they've forced the White House staff to sign non-disclosure agreements, which are being litigated. Just in terms of how you see that changing the political culture, even if it obviously can't change the laws that you were talking about. And I'm not trying to politicize the discussion here, but I do think that these things matter, that people are motivated by money, but also, they care about their reputation. So I guess I'm just looking to hopefully be reassured that this regime is so firm and so long-standing that it will survive this, what we see happening now. Thank you.
Great. So whistleblowing in the National Whistleblower Center, we do all types of cases, all types of issues. So sure, things can get better or worse under any administration. These particular laws that I'm talking about here have not been negatively impacted that we can see yet, and I doubt they will be. They work and they have strong support within the prosecutorial arms because they're good laws. You do see priorities, and it will come into like where the money comes, whether they fund the whistleblower offices, whether it's considered a priority or not. So there's a lot of politics can come in, but right now it's all working. And significantly, the mandates on anonymity and confidentiality seem to be holding really well. The good news is in 2018, through unanimous support in Congress, we tripled the Irs Whistleblower Law. So it was working, but they amended it to include all criminal tax penalties. It used to be interpreted just civil. It now covers money laundering. It now covers, this is very important, non-tax issues enforced by the IRS, which really gets you into money laundering, where the money launderer may not owe taxes in the United States, but be guilty of other infractions related to money laundering. So we have seen an actual expansion of these laws with full bipartisan support. Just in that law went through in February 2018. So far, smooth sailing. But I will tell you right now, National Whistleblower Center, every day we fear, because we kind of view it as these laws are working great, and the more they work, the more benefits, the stronger they will be, and the less risk there will be of their being repealed. And I testified 2 years ago before Republican Congress. The chairs were the two heads of the Freedom Caucus. Meadows and Jordan chaired the particular committee, and it was about agencies paying people money outside of the official appropriations process. And I testified that these whistleblower reward laws must be protected. They work. That committee, Democrat and Republican, unanimously supported it on the record. So from the Freedom Caucus all the way to the most liberal Democrat. So far, so good. But let's hope.
Sorry, I have a quick clarifying question about the process. When you have a whistleblower, how much of it is the whistleblower going to the government and saying you're being defrauded or somebody's not paying their taxes, whatever, and how much of it is essentially like a citizen suit? I mean, I think of Keatam more as a citizen suit where the whistleblower is going to court suing, and if they get the damages, most of it goes to the Treasury, some goes to them. I'm wondering if you could clarify some of the pathways.
This is a fantastic question. I'm very happy you've asked. This is actually very important. Should have been in a slide. First, I'm going to break it down a little. Who is a whistleblower? That I should have asked right up front, because it goes to the heart of your question. Under False Claims Act, a company can be a whistleblower, a corporation, an NGO. Any person, which includes corporations, as we know under Citizens United, that has original information about a crime can step forward and file the case. Now let's go to Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and those laws, specifically securities. They permit an analyst, this was a major amendment, to become a whistleblower in the definition. And an analyst is somebody who has no direct firsthand knowledge, but can analyze information and file. So for example, an NGO in Africa or working on fishing issues that can analyze what's going on, say in a specific area, and collect information, they can become a whistleblower, fully qualified. So between the analyst and the corporate structure, you can see the government's looking for quality information. There are some technicalities, I won't get into it, But these laws are very open to NGOs to use them and companies. Now, the second question is, how does it relate to a citizen suit and similar type of laws? Okay. All of these whistleblower reward laws at phase 1 require the whistleblower to give the information to the US government, a specific office or a specific entity within the government with jurisdiction over the law. Got to follow the rules. Then, under some of the laws, if the government does nothing, then you're out. It's really, you help the government, you try to convince the government to file the enforcement action. If they do, you get your 10 to 30% or 15 to 30% depending on the law. But if the government declines to do anything, you're left with maybe going to the press to expose it, going to Congress to push them to get an enforcement action, whatever. So far, it is our view of the governments that have this discretion that it's all based on the quality of information. They're getting a lot of cases, a lot of very strong cases, and we've seen it over time, where maybe this case can bring in 10 million. Okay, well, that was good 20 years ago, but now they want 50 million. They will also categorize cases on priorities, and this is where the environment and trafficking and IUU comes in. So we've done cases, say we did a FEMA case for fraud in disaster relief. There was very little money, but they don't like people stealing from tornado victims, flood victims, so they crush them. Okay, that's that. Then under False Claims Act, which is really the best one of it, the one that Lincoln got through, then amended. This is the same.